We all have that one game you'd play as a kid that has stuck with us all the way through to being a dusty 30-year-old, sneaking their way to the back of our minds and staying there until we randomly remember them as adults. And then you cry about being a corpse. There's just something about booting up an old game and hearing that crisp minigame music that instantly fires up your neurons and gets that good old nostalgia gland going. With that being said though, big companies have figured out that they can take all that nostalgia for their older titles and turn it into a way to suck more of that hard-earned money straight from your wallet, creating a new and innovative concept of taking an old game and upping the polygon count.
We're just messing with you, Biden.
While they're not exactly a new thing, remasters and remakes have become increasingly popular over the last decade, with remasters in particular being a great way for game companies to turn nostalgia into that sweet dollar. Basically, all they need to do is take an older game everyone likes, clean it up a little bit, add in a new game mode here, a new face model there, and if you're lucky, they might even include all the additional DLC. That'll be $75 please. Admittedly, I do think remasters have a pretty iffy reputation, especially when you have, certain companies releasing 6 different versions of the same 2 games and claiming it's totally worth the £50. This game came out 5 years ago, why do we already need a remaster, Neil?
We had a school project.
This is where remakes come in, requiring a whole new level of attention and detail, being basically a brand new game built from the ground up, and usually being looked at way more favourably than remasters. Think games like Doom 2016, Silent Hill 2, Final Fantasy VII, and like any of the recent Resident Evil games featuring Leon Kennedy and that beautiful head of hair. Overall though, I would say that remasters are still a good way for people to experience their favourite games without having to break out their PS2. Now, with all that said, you'd probably think creating a remastered version of 3 of the most popular PS2 games ever made would be an absolute guaranteed way to collect generational wealth. And clearly this was Rockstar's thought process too, as in 2021 they announced that they would be remastering GTA 3, Vice City, and San Andreas into one definitive game. These 3 GTA games being seen as instant classics that defined so many people's childhoods. These are games that have stood the test of time and are still talked about fondly to this very day.
Today, I'm going to be talking about customer service.
So surely, there would be no possible way that Rockstar could mess this up. Oh, come the fuck on. Let's go back to the early 2000s, a time where Rockstar actually released games instead of just delaying one that's been in development for 13 years. However, back in the day, Rockstar wasn't messing around, pumping out all 3 of these games in just over 4 years, with each receiving huge critical acclaim. Like, just look at some of these review scores. You can't get any more peak than this.
Someone cooked here.
GTA 3 broke the mold, taking the series from a 2D top-down open-world game to a way more immersive 3D open-world game that really showcased what the PS2 was capable of, and also made Rockstar a lot of fucking money. Then we had Vice City, which was originally planned to be an expansion pack for GTA 3, but then Rockstar seen how much money they made from that thing and decided to just make Vice City a full-on standalone game, which only gave devs around 9 months to develop it. Yet despite that insane development window, Vice City somehow managed to not only improve upon GTA 3 in almost every way, but also brought so much more personality and creativity to the series, dripping in 80s nostalgia, containing an incredible soundtrack, and also bringing Hawaiian shirts back into style. And finally, we have San Andreas, a game that many fans hold close to their hearts, mainly for the memes.
Shit. Here we go again.
Seriously though, San Andreas is arguably the most fondly remembered of the PS2 trilogy, again improving upon its predecessor, having an even more complex and detailed open world, and of course, it made Rockstar like $100 million. Although, we will need to subtract $20 million from that, after Rockstar was sued by some very angry parents once the hot coffee minigame was found in San Andreas' code. Which, for anyone who doesn't know, it was basically a fully clothed sex minigame. Regardless of the controversy all 3 of these games garnered when they came out, they are still seen as masterpieces and some of the finest games to ever grace the PlayStation 2, which is definitely saying something considering the competition at the time. However, while these games set the modern standard for open world crime games, they unfortunately weren't immune to the effects of aging, and as time moved on, these games became older, more outdated, and people would inevitably move on to the next big thing, whether that be a shiny new console or the next edition in this series, ultimately leaving these revolutionary games in the past. So let's fast forward nearly 20 years in the future, to the year of 2021, where a lot has changed obviously. The PS2 has long been retired, with the PS5 currently taking its place, way more people play games on our high-end gaming PCs now, and Rockstar hasn't put out a GTA game since 2013. With that in mind though, this was a year that GTA 3 turned 20 years old, and as such you'd probably think that Rockstar would have something planned to celebrate the anniversary of one of their most important games. Turns out they forgot.
Happy birthday to you.
Okay, they maybe didn't forget about it entirely, but they definitely didn't leave themselves with a lot of time to capitalise on GTA 3's 20th birthday. So, what could they do? Now, given what I've talked about in this video, you may think the answer to that question is pretty easy. Just remake the game like Capcom had done with the Resident Evil games, and I'm sure an employee or two might have mentioned that idea, only for Rockstar execs to slowly turn around and say,
Fuck.
The problem with remakes is that they take way more time to develop because they're effectively new games being built from the ground up, costing a lot more money, and Rockstar wasn't interested in spending money, they were only interested in making money. So to avoid dipping into the GTA 6 fund, Rockstar decided to go down a slightly different route, opting to remaster not only GTA 3 but also Vice City and San Andreas, since all three games are kinda seen as the PS2 trilogy, updating the visuals, adding in modern mechanics, and still maintaining the original charm these games had, ultimately making, in Rockstar's eyes, the definitive version of these games. Now, in fairness, I can understand the decision to do this. People fell in love with the original versions of these games, so why bother drastically changing them with a remake? I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, you know? Plus, again, it was fairly apparent that remakes require a huge amount of care and attention, which evidently was something Rockstar didn't give a fuck about. I mean, come on, we've got to hit those holiday sales somehow. What I absolutely can't understand though, is that out of every competent developer you could have tasked to make these remasters, you decided to go with the guys who are known for making, shitty mobile ports. Meet Grove Street Games, previously known as War Drum Studios, a small company who prior to making these remasters were mostly known for taking several existing Rockstar games like Max Payne, Bully, and a whole bunch of GTA titles, and then porting them onto your iPhone with, varying success. Okay, look, I don't doubt it takes a lot of skill and effort to port these games onto a mobile phone without it deciding to spontaneously combust in your hand. But besides porting games, the only other thing that Grove Street Games had done was develop the Xbox 360 and PS3 versions of San Andreas, which apparently were just a mobile port slapped onto consoles that ran at a smooth 15 frames per second. So with that reputation in mind, Rockstar decided that these guys were clearly the right ones for the job, and trusted them to develop a highly anticipated remaster of not one, but 3 of the most popular PS2 games ever made. Oh, and remember how I said they were a small company? Yeah, I meant it mostly had about 50 employees. Nonetheless, Rockstar had obviously been impressed by Grove Street's previous work, and thus Grove Street Games were the chosen ones, tasked to make what would go on to be known as GTA The Trilogy, the Definitive Edition. Is that honestly the title? Now, as we've established, the games are, well, very old, and as such, they naturally had a lot of outdated aspects to them, most notably being that they were developed on the Renderware engine, which back in the early 2000s made complete sense because Renderware was used for pretty much every game that came out. However, nowadays, the Renderware engine is a relic of the past, with most AAA developers opting to use the Unreal Engine instead, which naturally was the engine Grove Street decided to use for these remasters, which in theory sounds fine. In practice though, all Grove Street actually did was take these 20-year-old game codes and dump them into Unreal Engine 4, expecting them to work perfectly. And as we'll come to learn, that didn't really happen. The thing is, this wouldn't have been a bad idea if Grove Street had enough time to fix any issues this would have caused, but apparently the development timeline for this remaster was only 2 years, and once the team actually cracked open these old games, I think it dawned on them just how much work they needed to do. The first thing they noticed after porting these games to Unreal 4 is that they looked too clean. They were missing the griminess of the original games, so to amend that, they smeared dirt on everything. After that, the next issue was trying to find important game files, like existing audio, textures, or even character models that had seemingly just vanished. Now, in fairness to Grove Street, they did think of a good workaround to this, being that they would just remake any of the missing assets. Unfortunately though, when you looked at these new assets in comparison to the ones from the original games, the quality was slightly different. So they went with option B. AI. That's right, using the wonders of artificial intelligence, Grove Street AI upscaled pretty much everything. Buildings, vehicles, textures, character models. All of it was hit with those AI upscales, which led to, well, mixed results. At this point, I think it becomes fairly apparent that due to the limited development time Grove Street had to remaster all 3 of these games, along with being such a small studio, time-saving measures like this was the only way the game was going to be finished on time. However, these development issues clearly weren't a problem for either Rockstar or Take-Two, because despite the insane amount of pressure Grove Street was under, that November deadline wasn't going anywhere, even though it was abundantly obvious that the game was going to need at least 6 more months to cook. Anyway, regardless of the plethora of issues Grove Street was facing, there was still no actual confirmation that this remaster was even happening. All fans really had to go off was just rumours and hearsay. That was until the game's rating was leaked by the Korean Games Rating Committee, leading to Rockstar basically just saying, yeah, we're making it. That confirmation was enough to get fans hyped, knowing that they'd finally be able to play their childhood favourites, now with shiny 4K resolution, new features, better load times, higher frame rates. Clearly this was going to be the defensive way to play these games. A thought that Rockstar also shared, so naturally they decided to remove any other version of these games from digital stores. Obviously, this decision didn't go down too well, with many seeing it as a shady way to force people to buy the remaster, especially considering when this happened, no actual gameplay had been shown whatsoever. The only time Rockstar did show anything was in a brief minute-long trailer that honestly didn't really help. I mean, sure, these cutscenes are definitely higher resolution, but as far as actual gameplay goes, we got nothing besides some strange looking models. If the lack of gameplay and removal of older versions wasn't enough of a red flag, the closer we got to that November release date, the worse things were looking, as Rockstar would go on to announce that any physical copies of the game were going to be delayed, meaning that if you wanted to buy the game, you'd need to buy it digitally. Now, why were the physical copies delayed, I hear you ask? Well, I don't fucking know, because Rockstar never actually gave a reason. Although, if I were to put my tinfoil hat on, it was probably because they'd seen the state of this game before release and figured if they made it completely digital, it would be harder to refund at your local CEX. Oh, and one more thing, no review codes were sent out either. Yeah, Rockstar absolutely knew this was going to be a mess. So with a developer that was way too small and way too inexperienced, with no physical copies ready for store shelves, with no review codes sent to game critics, with all the old versions deleted off Steam, and still with no gameplay showing, on November 11th, 2021, Rockstar released GTA The Definitive Edition. And it very quickly became the worst game of the year. Now firstly, if you bought the game on either PlayStation, Xbox or Nintendo Switch, you could at the very least play the thing. PC players, on the other hand, didn't have as much luck. Literally, right as the Definitive Edition was coming out, Rockstar's game launcher went offline for maintenance. Meaning, see that game you just spent $60 on? Lol, you can't play it. The launcher did go back online around a day later, but the Definitive Edition remained unplayable for a further 2 days, while Rockstar removed unintentional files that had been left in the game, which with the help of some lovely hackers, was revealed to be a ton of removed radio songs that had just been disabled, developer notes, and, the hot coffee minigame. How did this end up in here again? However, non-PC players avoided this issue entirely, and as such, when they booted up their consoles and started playing this remaster, they were greeted with from the very moment players pressed start, they were plagued with all sorts of glitches and technical issues. Like invisible walls, bushes that could stop cars, falling through the map, being launched into oblivion, extreme close-ups, vehicular homicide via cutscene, sudden traffic,
What in fuck's name are you doing?
and whatever the fuck is happening here. Now normally a day 1 patch would help amend these issues, but in this case, I guess the day 1 patch wasn't ready, meaning when the game launched, we got to see it in all its glitch-filled glory, while the devs scrambled to make a patch big enough to address the long list of problems. Even looking past all of this stuff, the game was heavily criticised for how it looks, and well, yeah, maybe using AI to graphically enhance the game wasn't the best idea. Like, Jesus fucking Christ. I mean, sure, you can argue GTA 3 and Vice City look okay-ish, but the second you get to San Andreas, which originally went for a more realistic style, you can really see how atrocious these updated graphics look. On top of all of that, the Definitive Edition had completely cut out multiple features that were present in the originals, like classic game modes, the aforementioned soundtracks, and even fucking fog. Don't worry though, because now you've got GTA 5 style aiming, which apparently dislocates your wrist. Honestly, I don't think it's hyperbolic to say that this game is probably the buggiest Rockstar game ever made. Like, it's obvious there is no real care put into this project because, well, fucking look at it. I mean, let's not forget, Rockstar at this point in time was known for the quality of their games. So to go from something like Red Dead 2 to them releasing one of the buggiest games of the year was a little unexpected. Obviously, as soon as this game dropped, everyone tore into it, with one quick YouTube search resulting in either half-an-hour-long glitch compilations or in-depth reviews making it super clear that you definitely shouldn't waste your money on this thing, much to the ire of Rockstar. Speaking of which, upon facing this huge amount of backlash, Rockstar did the brave thing and went into hiding for a week, eventually coming out with a statement basically saying they're sorry for the game being a mess and that they plan on fixing it ASAP. They also made the smart decision to bring back the original versions of these games, with PC players who had bought the Definitive Edition being able to download them free of charge. And as for console players,
I want some more.
They got nothing. Anyway, after this statement, Rockstar went back into hiding, with Grove Street being left to try and make this game, well, playable, while also taking the brunt of the backlash from fans who blamed them for the remaster's poor quality. But despite all this drama, they continued to patch up the game for the next few years. Which takes us all the way to 2024, with the last major update coming out and seemingly bringing the Definitive Edition to a much more stable state, fixing a wide array of issues, and also removing any mention of Grove Street games entirely. Wait, what? Yeah, so apparently after Grove Street spent years fixing this game post-release, at some point before the last update came out, Rockstar ended their working relationship and scrubbed any reference to them from the final game. A decision that led to Grove Street Games unfollowing Rockstar on Twitter and their CEO tweeting out to say that the whole thing was a dick move. And let's be honest, my man isn't wrong. As of now, the Definitive Edition is definitely in a much better shape than it was at launch. The graphics and lighting have been improved, and the glitches are more or less gone. Mostly. What I will say though is that playing this game 5 years later in 2026 really makes me think that these older games were never meant to be in 4K high definition. I mean, they obviously weren't visual masterpieces back in the day, but they had a clear style that I don't think was ever going to translate well in a remaster, especially one that was very clearly rushed out by a publisher who was only interested in adding more money into their GTA 6 fund. Anyway, that's for everyone involved. Grove Street looks to be doing a lot better nowadays, mostly working on the Ark series. And as for good old Rockstar, they've pretty much swept this game under the rug and moved on to, of course, GTA 6, which I have no doubt will absolutely take over the world when it comes out in November. You know, unless it gets delayed again.